This is a dog portrait painting demonstration. Let's now put a background. Why do we need a background at this stage? One reason is because having paint around the dog will help me solve the edge problem. Another reason is that it will create the color world of this painting. My choices can be as different as an orange background or blue background, a very ornate background, very flat background. So there is endless possibilities. But for me, background is always a supporting element for the painting. And since I am always looking for harmony and the beauty in the painting, I prefer to have the background be harmonious to the painting and help the painting rather than be contradicted. And I'm using a little bit more medium because I want the paint to be more thinner, maybe looser, in some cases unfinished, and more transparent to create that feeling of being almost like a study rather than a finished painting. Now, the backgrounds are not etched in stone. They are flexible and always changes as the painting develops. Right now, we have very little idea what the foreground will look, what the dog will look in terms of values and edge relationships. So we'll adjust the background to constantly benefit the expression of the dog. So what is the difference between painting a human portrait and painting a dog? Well, there is not as much difference as you think. We are still painting space, we're still painting shapes, we're still creating an illusion of depth and a sense of light versus shadow. But now we have a lot of texture, a lot of hair. Some hair are long, like on the ears, are more flowing, more silky. And the hair on the face, it's a puppy, so they are still short and flat looking. So we're going to use a brush strokes to describe this different quality of textures and hair or the fur. Looking at the highlights, there is definite quality of silkiness to it because it's so reflective. The highlights move energetically, dynamically, fast. Let's start by laying out a few more shadows, which I didn't. It's a shadow of yellow ochre, orange coloring. This dog has double color. It's always more fun to paint something that's a little more complex and not just a black dog. Here on the eyebrow, and since I'm doing this few brushstroke on the ears, it's a shorter hair. My brushstroke is very much just moving along the form, describing the form itself. So not so much how the hair are growing. So if I were to describe the hair, that's the origin, where they start and where they finish. But I also want to use my brushstroke to create a structure of this chin. So I will be moving the brushstrokes in a different direction along with the hair. Since I have this color, I'm gonna just vary a little bit, add a little bit of white into the red, and add a tiny bit of ultramarine to get more violet pink. And I'm gonna caress the top plane of the nose and differentiate between the top plane and the side plane. And then since I have that, I'm going to put a little mark. Let's start by placing first layer of the light. Because the light comes on top of the coloring of the dog, it's important to paint in a few layers, at least for me. Again, there is no one way or correct way of painting. We all in the search of finding what is good way of painting for us. What's good for me may not be relevant to you because you have a different psychological makeup. A good practice of painting is mix the paint and then place a brushstroke and don't continue, but kind of back away and evaluate if that is the right value. I'm not so much concerned about the color yet because the color can change even just by putting a different color of the highlight. It can affect the look of this color. But I'm in the beginning, at least, more concerned whether I create a right value and what I'm looking for if I'm light enough. So now when I paint the light, I'm not asking myself if I'm dark enough, but I'm asking myself, is this first brushstroke will get this surface look lit up? And I'm still not convinced that it does. So I'm gonna raise the value a little bit more. Again, make the brushstroke, put it in, evaluate, and if it fits, I will continue. I think I need to add a little bit of warmth and just a little bit reddish purple coloration. It's too green. It just needs, yeah, that's better, needs to shift into a different, almost color harmony. Instead of greenish gray to more purplish, reddish color family. Okay, so again, now I'm placing my brushstroke on the nose bridge, the frontal plane. I'm tilting my brushstroke towards the side plane and just veering just slightly lighter, coming to the eye behind the muzzle and get a little bit darker value and paint the plane, temporal plane. Repeat that symmetry on the other side, knowing that this is more in shadow, which I didn't place, but that's okay. I can do it now. And then again, maybe just make my paint a little bit more violet and add a little bit more medium to have a longer paint and to create a more flowing expression. Okay, and I will color correct this. It's a little transparent red oxide. As you see my palette, I vary my color as I paint and go along. I don't pre-mix my colors in advance, especially if it's just a small, petite painting. I feel there is no need to have a big blotches of paint. But what I am doing is I'm shifting my colors almost like if it was a lake. I'm just not inventing a new color, starting a new patch separately, but I'm creating a relationship between all these colors, just modifying them and shifting them as the temperature changes. Here, maybe a little bit cooler. And again, right now, I'm not painting the top layer of light. I'm just setting up the stage. Is an eyebrow arch here, a brush for my background, getting a little bit more of a background. I'm mixing neutral gray, and I like to have a neutral gray on my palette because it's a wonderful starter for the mid-value background. And notice how I'm using my background to carve out a shape of the head and to correct the shapes and negative spaces that I needed. Also, maybe not bad idea, even at this point, to introduce a tiny bit of a background. Maybe it's too light. Maybe I'll wait for this. Let's find at least one area where we can touch a tiny bit of a background into the structure of that dog with the purpose of relating back space to the front space, to creating that harmony. The best way to create color harmony is to keep recycling and reusing the colors that you already established as your color world of the painting. So let's mix a yellow coloration of the muzzle and just make sure that everything is painted and everything is developing at the same speed. Still very much staying general, non-specific, but increasing the level of accuracy and description slowly. There is no hurry. Now I'm adding the light shapes on the muzzle. So this is the first layer of the muzzle. This is the cheek behind it. The brushstroke can be sideways. And then it comes around smile and picks up a very light value, probably the lightest value you have, and maybe carrying less color to be more lit up. I always emphasize that as humans, we can see only one thing at a time, whether it's a color or it's a light. The light that has too much color ceases to be the light. It becomes a piece of color. So always remove the color if you want more light. Desaturate or rather brighten by just adding more white into it. On the other side, I have a reflective light, probably from the bottom planes. So I'm not going to put that just yet. Hold that a little bit back, a little color note here. Maybe it just needs to be less, and a little color note. Creating a little bit more shadow out of this just to revisit some of this. And this is where the fur gets a little bit longer. And I'd like to paint the expression of that fur. So sometimes we paint the form and give the form dominance, priority. And sometimes the expression of the hair. So this is maybe a little bit more gestural expression, how the hair grow. And now I can see that my shape of shadow here can move down and take a different shape and also become a little warmer. Warmer shadows have depth. Cooler shadows have flatness. The shadow has always both notes. It has a cool notes and the warm notes. But the temperature of the shadow is always warm, predominantly. And I'll just come back and deepen this shadow. This is again, you can see how cool it is. And if I just add a little bit of the warmer note, at least on the periphery of that, a little warmer coloration, it will start looking more belonging to that peel. So when you're using blue in the shadow, they become too inky and lose the depth. So keep that in mind. And for the most part, keep your dark values preserved for the accents. Don't use up your darkest value till you get to the accent. And that's not to say that wait to put your accents to the end. You can see that I am putting some of those already, because what you want to do anytime you paint, whether it's any type of portrait or still life or landscape, you always want to paint the finish, the full expression of values, the full definition of edges, lost edges. So I'm just going around and correcting. And I feel like this would be a good time to come back to the eyes, since eyes are the focal point of any portrait. As humans, we always want to connect and we always want to have an eye contact. So here I have just mainly my block in a transparent red oxide. I slightly darken the pupils, and I'm gonna just double check on articulation of angles, darkening the what we would call eyelash line. And in fact, whatever I'm doing now, I'm very much treating as a first layer. How interestingly, the background can change the painting.